Hello, friends. Well, we got it. The new moon activation finally came. There it was. There it is. It started about an hour after the new moon activated. So I'm just going to do a 2-minute to 3-minute overview, and then I'm going to go deeper into the trends of the new moon energies and what this means going forward. So the new moon is an activation time. It's like a time of new beginnings. But because of the time and place where we're at in history and in general, these energies present opportunities that are going to be carrying with us for weeks at least. Okay, that's what I think. So what you have here is you have the activation that is igniting all of what's been happening since September 7th, when this gateway period kind of activated. The summary for you is that the shadowlands have been stirred up personally in society, and I'm going to go into deep detail about that. Just really quickly, I just want to look at this tube of light here. And what it did was, from a frequency standpoint, it popped us down even further than we'd been, because we've been bouncing along really well here without support from the right resonance. And with the right resonance, we went into the 23s. So it gives us kind of an expanded range of frequencies, expanded options and activities and possibilities, if you will. And then the amplitudes. Now, this was really interesting about the amplitudes, and it was a really interesting coincidence. There's the crows chiming in. Look at the numbers. Everybody wants to participate here. So the white amplitude, that's the strength of the resonance, peaked at 71 during this activation. But look at these other numbers: 55, 44, and 33. All double numbers. To me, this adds a kind of a magical element towards the positive, because a lot of what I have to go through is a lot about the challenges that are facing us. But even in the images that I've presented in the 2 weeks prior to this activation, there's hope. You know, I got to tell you something. I woke up this morning. I've been up since 3:15 this morning, the last 2 days. That's when I've been getting up. And I woke up with this incredible sense of hope is renewed. And you know what? I'm going to link to that article I wrote on Hope is Renewed for 9/11. This new moon is bringing a positive spin to these energies and a potential to upgrade. Okay, now let's get into it. Okay, well, the prominent features in terms of the image on this chart and recent charts have been these lines going across right here. And they're dominated within by the white resonance, but they have, shades of particularly red, a little bit, maybe some yellow, but and then we just sort of see it continue periodically. So that's the key thing. And the other prominent thing on this chart is this image, which we'll talk about. And then this here, I don't know what that is. I mean, for all I know, it could be, for all we know, it could be another technological effect that only targets these, I believe it's delta brainwaves, brainwave area, or maybe it's just low frequency signals. I'm not really sure what it is. Again, it does look like jail bars as well. So I thought that was interesting. Okay, now let's go and look behind the numbers. And I'm going to show you some surprising things that pop out on this chart once we start taking a closer look into it. But first, let's just look at the numbers. The biggest thing in the numbers that are behind these images still is the really great movement and the wide movement of the green frequency. The green, in my view, is closest to us as human beings. And, you still have the yellow kind of in a narrow band. So it looks like we're experiencing in our energetic environment that narrow band. The red kind of bouncing around, but once in a while it'll kind of stay for a few hours at a certain level. And then the white is moving all over its range. But the big thing is about the green, because for quite some time this year, going back into the summer, for example, and even before that, it was very hard for the green to move below 25.2, which is about right here. And now you can see that it's moving below that with no problem. And there's also not a lot of, there's no big, huge white waves of resonance. Before, that's what was kind of pushing it down there. So we've gained more freedom. And so if you could think of the frequency range as sort of a menu of choices of activities or ways of expressions, right? Then you could think of that as being that we as human beings have gained more access to our own creative self and the range of frequencies within which we do that. Now, of course, all of these are in our environment. I focus in on the green because it does seem to affect our body the most. This is just anecdotal, but that's been my observation going back several years. It supports us. But here's the thing. When these frequencies get ramped up, it can really, really affect us bodily, right? Because as energy moves through us, we may experience discomfort. So if you don't want to change, if you're having resistance in some areas of your life, if there are things that are tough to face or to handle, if you want to really narrow your experience to a particular range of activity, and that's your focus, and you want to stay focused on that, then having a lot of the green resonance, having it very strongly present, or having it bounce all around might be uncomfortable for you. And I have experienced it being uncomfortable for me, that's for sure. Yeah, so anyway, that happens. I'm just going to note the amplitudes were all pretty low and the qualities all pretty low as well, or within kind of a normal range. And you had sort of this little heartbeat of the green, but it's really just how clear it is. Periodically it spikes in how clear this resonance is relative to itself, but also actually relative to the others, because you see this one's at 31. So it's much higher numerically than any of the others by at least double, sometimes more. Yeah, so, sometimes this is all over. Sometimes there's rapid, repeated spikes, and it's just like we get little arrests. Okay, so we get the green come through strong and clear, and then we get little rest periods. With everything that's going on in the chart, which is a lot of shadow work, seems to be being initiated, and that can be uncomfortable. And I talked about how the geomagnetics had risen, and they were still a little bit up. So that also kind of, in my view, kind of rubs the energy in our field, and then we can decide if we get agitated what to do about that, right? We could kind of fight to get back to our old equilibrium, or we could create a new equilibrium, and that might involve shifts in our life. And then here's the solar flare activity, and it's still I call this the scrubbing pattern, where it just feels like it's in your field. Like, I've been cleaning the bathroom a lot lately because I'm doing like a deep clean, like the kind of deep clean that you just do like, once in a while. And, I can have to get in there and really scrub and, find these little spots and all this kind of stuff. And that's kind of how this feels. And it can feel uncomfortable. It can feel uncomfortable because, so I relate the solar activity and the geomagnetic activity to us. Like if we're sort of a sun shining from the heart, but we look like a physical body, but we're made of light. So in my view, this interacts with the human energy field, these factors, and that's why I'm talking about them now. But anyway, so I see this solar flares. They're more present within the field, whereas this is more presenting at the edge of the field. That's normally how I perceive this. But anyway, yeah, so this is uncomfortable because it encourages us to kind of go deep within and then see these little downward pulls. It kind of pulls us into look at things. And this is a lot of chaotic energy. I used this image before, and I'm using it again this time without the woman. But this is a closer look at the. There's an activation here. There's a fire being lit, and I want to go through how this has transpired. I did it once in the last video, but now we're going to look at another element. So here, the fire is being lit. And it's being lit in our world as well. I'm being on the West Coast, particularly aware of it. But what's interesting is, so this is bringing up a lot of aspects and energy within ourselves of the shadow side of our personality, things that aren't maybe going great in our lives. And there's an activation for those to pop up in our lives, and then for us to be able to then look at them if we choose to do that, or we could be in denial, which then usually makes the situation gives it more pressure, gives it more like a pressure cooker. And then this is also going on in our societies because the astrology that's going on, which has to do with systems of government, systems of finance, systems of organization, and then that's with Saturn, and then with Pluto, with this kind of a grinding energy, almost like the geomagnetics, but like a grinding energy of getting to the light within. And everything that does not align with that gets kind of burned in the fire. And I'm going to link my my friend Andrea's video. I'm just going to make a note here. I'm going to link her video below. I put a link to her website on the last video, but because she describes that action of Pluto so well, it's really quite fantastic. Pluto kind of activating that light within through burning down what's not working, through agitating away what's not working. And that could be the fiery emotions that we have, or as we're seeing, there's quite a bit of fire in the actual IRL, in the real life, in real life. Now, I thought it was really interesting because I saw a figure running along this, and there was a figure at the beginning of the activation as well. So I want to go back and look at that. But first, let's look at this. This is really interesting because you see in all this red and yellow. Now, to me, red and yellow is a lot of the astral energy and fourth dimensional density. When we address our shadow personality, we get the opportunity to lighten this up. But now look what's happened. It shifts from darker reds and kind of a dull oranges here, and then it brightens here. So you see there's a lot of tools that we have in the shadow side of our personality that are noteworthy. You can look at a book by the author Machiavelli, for example. That would be a classic kind of an astral chaos, kind of dark strategy in a way, okay? But that's used a lot in our advertising, okay, and in selling processes and other things. But you can also look at that energy as being a deep understanding of the human psyche, of strategy, of how to interact with people to pursue your aims. So let's just use that as an example because I'm pretty familiar with, I studied that in school. So here you've got like the dark energies, right? Let's say that would be using Machiavelli's rules or suggestions solely for your personal aim and gain. So that would be sort of like in a deeper density, sort of the dull, darker yellows, the duller, darker oranges, kind of more thicker reds, where it's more of a burnt orange or a rust or even, So then, but as you go here, so look what happens. The white resonance is in the center of all this. That's kind of like a Pluto activation. It's really actually very appropriate to have the fire around it because what happens is the light within whatever this situation would represent for you personally or for any particular society or for human consciousness at large. Do you see here how now the red is very lightened? Okay, it's very bright. We're kind of getting into ruby, more of a, very beautiful tones, okay? So what I want to say is you could have that knowledge and then you could choose not to use it in those ways, but you could use your knowledge of human beings to assist people in unwinding issues in relationships and unwinding interactions went bad. And, see what I'm saying here? the knowledge itself, the information itself isn't, I would put a lot of that in the shadow realm of our personalities because it's usually unconscious. But once we bring light to it, it's still of a certain nature. But when we integrate our shadow in a healthy way, we now have the inner power to use that with conscious choice. And where does that inner power come from? Rather than wielding it against another, right, which is very Machiavellian and very sneaky too, solely for personal aim, but at the expense of others, where it could even harm others, okay? Because it's okay to promote yourself. It's okay to do well, right? So we want to, there's a lot of shades of this. But anyway, what I'm trying to say is that when you have brought the light of consciousness to the shadow, you can use your tool sets for your highest good, which is the highest good of all if we're all from the same source, if we're all children of the Creator. And then when you consciously use those tools in alignment with the highest good, in alignment with God's will for you, then you can use tools like that quite effectively to work what would be viewed as positive change. So I'm editing and I wanted to just add this in here. At the level of transformation that I'm talking about, these healing and integrating the shadow side, and talking about these tool sets in this specific example. So at this point, those tool sets or that understanding has been upgraded, and even dimensionally our understanding has been expanded to where they're not recognizable relative to the original tool sets. So for example, Machiavelli wouldn't recognize them at all. So when I'm talking about using the newly transformed tool sets can be used, quote unquote, for good, I'm not talking about within the same dimensional state of reference. I'm not talking about, Machiavelli was very kind of, shadowy and sneaky, right? Sometimes you have to be sneaky to get some things done. But what I'm saying is that I'm not talking about within that same state. Okay, be shadowy and sneaky to do good using the exact same reference points that he did. In the burning up, in the fire, any detritus, any of that was not in alignment with the divinity that you are, or that it is within itself, is completely burned to crisp and to dust. So what arises out of that fire is a new form. It can remember the old, right? It's arising out of the old, but every single thing that wasn't aligned with God, with the divinity, the essence of God that was in its original creation, anything not aligned with that has been burned to ash. So once we recover our shadow, once we recover our ability to use a tool set from that side of our personality, we're in a whole new state of being when we act now. That's just what I wanted to add in there. Positive change. Once you act from that center, okay, so here, acting from the center where the white resonance has started to light up. Now here it's in process, okay? This is in the process of changing and transmuting and all that. So when this becomes a pure connection, right? When we've worked and really developed that connection with God, with your inner voice, with your soul, with the divinity that birthed you, that you are, right? That gives you life. Then you work from that conscious place. That's essentially when you are at 0 point. It's like you can look at the whole realm of, all the colors in the Schumann at all their various shades and make a conscious choice about that's in alignment with the highest good, with divine will for you, for what is your highest outcome? What's in your highest good? Isn't that cool? Oh my goodness. Now, let's look behind the scenes. Now, this is using a shadow tool set, okay? So now I'm going to use a shadow tool set, the ability to see behind the scenes, to the ability to see what's hidden. And I'm going to use it, I intend, in the highest good, to explain some information that you can then take and use as you wish, if it resonates with you. This is the shadow element. Now we're looking at the unconscious. I'm looking at the chart and saying, hey, what's hidden behind these images? How can we look at the way the frequencies are presented in images and get some more information? Well, what's really interesting when we do this, and I'm just going to pause it here for a sec so you can just see the whole chart for a minute. There's a couple things that I did. The first was I wanted to know where exactly is this frequency line? Like, what's the number? Because these frequencies correlate with brain waves, with human brain waves. And so I thought that I would get some information if I did that. The other thing was I noticed that these activations of these red, bursts of energy, red and yellow, but mostly red, and then these little figures that have been appearing, I've noticed that they all also occurred at this level. So I wanted to get that frequency and find out how it correlates with brain waves. So, and let me show you something really cool. I'll go to the brainwaves chart. Okay, so this was fascinating. So now you can see what I'm looking at, right? Okay, now let's go back. This is fascinating, okay? What I did was, because I used to work a lot with graphs and charts and having to estimate numbers and actually create the graphs and things. So I did an estimate, okay, so this is by hand my estimate of where the frequencies are. So we've got 8 from the space observing system, and then we've got 12, okay? So in between them, I had to create this myself, which was not that hard to do, okay? But anyway, so I've got 9, 10, and 11. And look at this. It absolutely perfectly matched up with 11, okay? And it's kind of like 11 plus, and then, few little bits of increment, tiny bit lower, but really it's lined up with 11 point something. Something small. So this is so cool, because now let's look at what that means. And then now the next thing is where the activation was occurring is here. And I estimated, I didn't create it all for you to see, but I did the same process, and I came up with that this is basically at your 7.83, which is called the natural frequency of the Earth. Whoa, look at these patterns. I just saw that. Look at that cool pattern in there. It's almost like it's moving. Yeah. I'm going to show you a little bit more of this too. I'm just noticing it because it's also down below. So it's so cool that it's also there. The other thing I want to note in this chart before we talk more about the brain waves is that where these little explosions, this is where the explosion of little red, and there's almost like a little figure there. And I can actually see a leg. Here's his bent knee. He has one leg standing and one leg with the bent knee. All this energy is within his body. There's going to be an arm there. That's his body going up to the head is in here. It's almost like he's got something on top of his head, and then an arm coming out here and then down. This figure appears, I think it's 3 times over the last few days. And then here, look, you can see, look how clear this white resonance is. The white resonance is like a higher dimensional energy, like celestial energy. It really supports the green. It really supports humanity. Sometimes it moves in concert with some of the other frequencies as well, with yellow in particular. But the fact is that, look, it also shows where the action is on the chart. And the action is in the initiation of this big bunch of mostly red, some yellow, but mostly, dominated by red energy. And that's fascinating. There is a kind of a face in here as well. And I could show that to you right now because it's actually pretty visible. I had already done this and then I by accident deleted it. Please pardon my play here. All right, so here's I better make it something that's easy to see. I make it pink. All right, so here's the face. And then this is so cool because you can see the eye right there. See that dark red spot? Right there, the red eye. He's kind of got a furrowed brow, okay? The other eye is behind here. It's completely filled with light. Okay, so here's one eye, brow kind of furrowed. And then here's almost like, doesn't it look like he has a mustache? And then here's, I don't know, the mouth, and then maybe a little scruff of the beard or whatever. It also almost looks like he has a fiery headdress here. It's kind of interesting, almost like a Quetzalcoatl figure. I have actually seen that in energy, and it was fantastically amazing to see the Quetzalcoatl energy. I did some videos on left eye and right eye and the meaning. So I'm not going to go into that here. I will reference those below. But basically, this is his right eye because he's looking at us. The right eye has the human. The left eye is where possession occurs. So if there's an entity working through the field, whether it's arcanic, whether it's demonic, whether it's whatever it is, pick your character, it's going to show here on the left eye. The more present the energy is, the more the eyes can be affected. And when the entity comes in and out, I actually didn't say this on the left eye video, but when the entity really makes itself present or draws back, it can actually change the eye, change the look of the eye. I had a fascinating client that I worked with who actually had the entity in both eyes, and that's how pervasive it was. And despite that, was able to live a life of, humble divinity. I mean, he was a regular guy, but he was able to not act on those dark impulses. These were dark, dense entities. When the session was done, and it was very intense, and when the session was done, his eye pupils returned to being fully round. It was so amazing. Yeah, that was beautiful. Woo! Anyway, okay, so now what we're seeing here is that the left eye is being filled with light. How I perceive that, and I'm going to invoke the violet flame over this entire conversation, because I like to do that, to use the sacred flame to burn the energy to a state of neutral, so that I'm not creating, I'm telling a story, and I'm not sending out a vibe that's anything other than neutral vibe of really unconditional love. And speaking from the heart. There we go. Oh, and let's bring in Archangel Michael too, the protector, the spiritual protector, and got all his blue energy here. So I ask him to be by my side while we talk about some of these intense topics. Okay, so basically, it's a perfect video to burn the violet flame through, or whatever color you prefer for yourself. What this would do is it would unhook the entity from the human being. I have seen this also when it's on the left side and it unhooks. I've seen it in the dying process, because when the human being dies, the entity will leave the field and move on. Now, if you happen to be present with someone who's passing on, you can ask Archangel Michael, you can ask your guides of the highest light, your higher self, to work with you. I'm of the highest light. You can ask, whatever your spiritual practice is, you can ask that the entity be wrapped and taken to its place of highest good. And in divine timing, I give that to God. What happens with that? When it's unwrapped, how its life is, where it goes, whatever. That's not my responsibility. But as a human being who's on earth, who's living in a physical body, I can ask the angels to do this. What this does is it allows them to be taken to their place of highest good. And sometimes that's staying on earth. I have seen that. I've seen that many times. There's certain types of beings that have a right to be here for whatever reason. They're allowed to be here, and so they stay. But there's a whole bunch that aren't allowed to be here at this time anymore. And so when you ask for this, you're just actually assisting. I always ask that this is in alignment with the divine plan. I give it to God. So I ask, and that it's in highest good. And if it's not in highest good, if it's not in alignment with the divine plan, then it's not going to happen. So there's a huge relief in just knowing and that God has the wheel. That the Creator's got this for us, and that level of trust, boy, it's like something we can rely on, like in the very depths of who we are. Yeah. So in situations like this, where we've got all this fire and mayhem going on, and let me go back to this for a second, it can be hard to connect with that knowing that all is well. with that knowing that your soul is immortal, that you are a child of the Creator, that I can walk my path and be well, because I'm walking in alignment with what is my soul path and my highest good. At these times, just having the knowing that it's possible, just asking. And if you can't put energy into it, it's fine. Don't worry about it. Allow it to, I like to allow these things to burn in the violet flame, or a flame that feels good, a color that feels good. You know, sometimes I might use gold, sometimes I might use white, sometimes I might use blue, green, whatever works for you, okay? Now let's go back to the hidden elements, because there's more to say here. This is, as this comes through, this is a Plutonian effect. I mean, this is how the energy of Pluto works, but this is a divine gift. God comes through, ignites within us. And you could also say the pineal is going to be active here, because the pineal is one of the key areas where we have a light connection in our body, which is a story for another day, all about those centers of the body. This is also it's a divine activation. All right, now see this line here? Watch this. Okay, now I just wanted to show you this, that at 11 here. Hold on. Okay. All right, so now I got to eyeball it. Okay, so now you can see we're just almost perfectly at 11. And then here, if I eyeball the middle of this energy right there, and I'm estimating that's about 7.83. I want to talk about what I think is happening here in terms of brain waves. This is so cool, you guys. Now, this activation started on September 7th. Okay, I'll talk about brainwaves after I explain this, because it's key to what's going on with the brainwaves. Where we had this figure in the chart. And I discussed it in the last video, but I've had some insights since then. Now, you know what was fascinating? So here was the gateway, okay, coming into the new moon. First, this figure initiated the energies that are now bringing us into the new moon. And, you know, I had described this in the last video, but when I looked at him again, I realized that he looks so much like the man who lit his foot on fire at a protest. And it literally happened the same day that this image. Alex and I were going back and looking at the dates and the images, and I couldn't believe it, that this actually happened the same day. Because every time after I made that video, the last video, I kept looking. Every time I looked, I saw the fire behind him and his hopping on his foot on fire. You know, and so I want to read to you. What I did was I looked up all the meanings of, foot on fire. Okay, now there's a lot of phrases about feet and fire or light, because fire also, basically you've got a very intense light down there at the foot. Okay, and again, I'm not going into politics here, but I want to show you, because one of the things that I am as a seer, so images carry meaning for me because of that. I access like the spiritual meaning in those. There are people who talk about that they receive a prophetic word. Well, I receive my information usually through images. So let me go through the phrases. Hold your feet to the fire. Okay, this is a colloquialism in American culture. It means that there is pressure to consent. There's a test of courage, or it can be a form of torture. So you see here the shadow elements of this image, but you also see the expanded elements. Okay, holding your feet to the fire could be a test of courage that you overcome, but it can also be a form of torture. So so when you see an image like this and you hear the information, what resonates with you? Okay, what's going on in your life? Are you going through a test of courage, or do you feel like you're being tortured by something? Maybe it's a relationship. Maybe it's a specific action someone took. Maybe, maybe there's actual physical pain or harm. I mean, a lot of people are getting beat up right now. People are getting shot. I mean, it's just terrible. There's also the idea of walking on coals. Now, some people walk on coals and they are unharmed. Some people walk on coals and they get burned. Okay, what's the difference between those? Is it a test of faith? There's the phrase, the colloquialism, that means a phrase in use, right, among people, to light a fire under you. What does that mean? It usually means to work harder, to work more quickly, to work more efficiently. So it can be about motivation lighting a fire under you, right? Because this guy's got a fire under his foot. Or it can be about admonition, right? Do you need to work harder? Do you need to do something a little more? Is there something that you need to do a little more efficiently? And if you do that, you might perform incredibly well. But this, it doesn't, that specific description doesn't apply to anyone. It applies to those with whom it resonates. So there's also the idea of a quickening, that because this figure, and it appeared in real life, okay, appeared on the Schumann and in real life the same day, okay, that's extremely like 1-to-1, okay, energy and in the physical, that means that this is very powerful. So the idea of a quickening happening is here, coming into the full moon, that energies are going to quicken up, okay? And see how these images are presenting our choices, okay? We can feel pressured. We can have a test of courage. We can be going through something torturous. We can succeed through our faith. There's also the idea of shining a light on your feet, okay, or being light on your feet. If someone's light on their feet, they're nimble, they're graceful, we might picture them dancing. But too much of that, and you could be ungrounded, okay? But light on your feet usually means moving with grace and ease. And how do we move through grace and ease? In a passage where the energy is quickening, that means physical activity, because there's a 1-to-1 between the energy and the physical activity is going to be quickening. We're going to be seeing this actually in real life around us, okay? That's what this seems to imply. This man I mentioned is pointed to the left, pointed backwards, okay? And because he's pointed backwards, what that means is that it's a shadow element in the chart, okay? So now the energies move to the right, so we're moving through this gateway here, okay, before the full moon, but we're dealing with the shadow because he's pointed to the left. One other thing, I'm going to do a couple Bible quotes here. If there's a lamp to my feet, let me read from Psalm 119, line 105. Your word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path. Rather than having the light burn us, okay, or be too bright, we can ask God, but we've got to ask, right? Let's engage. If that resonates with you, you can engage and ask that your way be lighted through this challenging time. In Matthew, now this was very interesting. In Matthew, I didn't write down the numbers of this Matthew phrase, but I did write down the words so I'd say it correctly. If a hand causes you to sin, okay, or an appendage. I mean, the quote is about the hand, but this person's foot's on fire, so it's possible you could lose use of your foot, okay? As terrible as that is, it looks like that could be what happened here. Or not. But if a hand causes you to sin, cut it off. It is better for you to enter life crippled than with two hands go to hell to the unquenchable fire. Isn't that amazing? In that instance, when they were on fire, they were going through hell. But I think it's a very interesting image of what the energies are going into the full moon. Now, I want to leave us here, this figure here, with the Irish saying, it's better to die on your feet than to live on your knees. And this concept seems to be coming up in the other figures on the chart. I want to show you that. You can see here that there is a figure, okay? And it's interesting because one of his knees is bent, just like the Irish saying, it talks about living on bent knees or living standing. Look at it. One of his knees appears bent and one of his knees is straight down. And I illustrated that here. See, one of his knees appears to be bent. One of his knees is straight down. It almost seems like he has some kind of either a headdress or antlers or I don't know what on top of his head. He seems to be, there's a lot of deep red. There's some very dark energy here at his eyes and nose. He's now running forward, though. Okay, so we're taking the shadow element into the new moon. He's now shifted. He's running forward, but he's all of the shadow element colors. But he's running on this line. Okay, now we'll talk about the brain waves. He's running on this line which light has been brought to. And he's about to run into this conflagration, this fire. But praise God, there's a light within the fire. Okay, that's our hope, our God guiding us. Okay, our connection within that guides us to our highest outcomes in our highest good. Okay, and you see that after that, the path continues. Okay, and there's look at that, isn't it amazing? Oh my God, look at the bright green. Okay, look, where's the red? Okay, now there's yellow. There's still now some new dense layers of energy has been revealed. But look at, right? When you came out of here, look what burned off. Okay, look what burned off. And now we integrate, and then we address the next level. When we bring light to that, right? It expands. See how this expanded, right? Because it was this wide, and then it expanded to this wide, and now there's work to do there. God, it's just so cool. All right, now last thing on the brainwaves here. I want to read this to you because I had to do a lot of research for this video. All right, now I just want to address the brainwaves here. Now, see, here's what's happening. It looks like, okay. So you have these activations occurring at 7.83. And that's where the activation of this guy happened, okay? 7.83. Now, what's really interesting is it was in the center of his body right here. For those of us literally going through the fire right now, and even observing those going through the fire, whatever state you're at, we went through with the images of, the foot and the light and lighting the path, all the range of those energy. There's the opportunity for the awakening to be at the heart level. And that's really big and impactful. To be able to begin to see your shadow and bring consciousness from the heart level, it's very, very powerful. For the heart to begin to open, a lot of cleanup work has been done. All right, so the initiation in the heart is happening at the theta level. Now, 7.83, the theta level is from 3 to 8 hertz, okay? So 8.83 is about theta level for human beings. This is sleep, deep meditation, dreams, vivid imagery, intuition, information. So there's sort of a non-verbal state, a dream state, an intuitive state, an extrasensory state. An observational state even, where these activations are happening. And then what happens is they are being brought to about 11 hertz, okay? Because see the activations happen here at that level, and there's almost like even an unconscious aspect to that, right? Because when we're in deep meditation, when we're sleeping, we're not always fully conscious, depending on the state of that activity that you're in. So then what happens is these activations, okay, they happen, and then bam, we light up with the white resonance in particular at 11 hertz. Now, so let's look at what 11 hertz is. 11 hertz is the alpha waves. So what are alpha waves? Quietly flowing thoughts. In other words, the ability to sort of slowly think through rationally what you've perceived at a deep level, to bring that to the surface. Being present in the now moment. Okay, so bringing it to our life now, like in real life. What's happening now? Bringing these unconscious, these shadow elements to the now moment in a way that where our healed self and now our more conscious and aware self can make conscious choices. Importantly, what happens at these hertz as well is mind-body integration and learning. We can be calm yet alert at the same time, and mental coordination. is involved at this level of hertz. So do you see we're being activated? We're being acted in the shadowlands of our personality and of our culture, but then we are bringing these very, very quickly, one to one, like the man with his foot on fire earlier in the imagery, right? It happened the same day. So this is happening in real time. We're perceiving the shadow. We're having the activations, sometimes in a dream state, sometimes intuitively, sometimes it's a knowing. We can be awake and have that as well. And then we're bringing it into our physical consciousness and integrating it in our mind, but also between the mind and the body. So we're bringing it to the surface of our awareness and then integrating in real life, in the present moment. What that means is that this is a huge, huge time to not just prepare for change, but to live that change in the moment, like we're doing this now. It's happening. These energies continue prominently for 3 days past the new moon, but then there's 2 weeks till the full moon. But not only that, they continue for some time after. And because of the events in the real world that are coming up, they are going to be preparing us for how we deal, in the United States at least, with the political situation and with changes to our institutions, because those are happening at all different levels, and with changes to ourselves and our lives. Once we had this activation, and we also had, see these here? See all this purple? Everybody's been talking about the purple on Twitter. In my view, this is a very divine frequency. My friend Alex shared this insight with me. Look at the tribute of light on 9/11. Now you can see here, there's some other images that show it better, but this one I can use for copyright purposes. I'm allowed to use this on this video. But you can see that each one of the tribute of light, where the Twin Towers stood, the World Trade Center, you can actually see that each one is made up of very thin lines but powerful and strong lines of light. Okay, see that? Now, and again, thank you, Alex, for this, because she nailed it. No! Okay. Whoa, look at that. That's pretty awesome. Actually, it's also here. Okay, so this is September 9th, 2 days later. Look at this. Okay, look at that. It's almost like a celestial presentation of those twin towers and the light between them. Look at it. And then this is what I wanted to show you, the DNA. Isn't this spiral like DNA? See how it's almost moving? When you look at it, I'll move my cursor here so you can just look. It feels like these lines of energy are just moving. And then this one, it's like do 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 do. It's almost like it has a sound to it, like boop, 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 boop. And then this one just feels like this one in particular just feels like it's swirling and swirling. And this one, there's movement in this one too. It's just the purple is so divine, such expanded frequencies. It's like this is where we're going. This is what we're grounding. We're grounding the new and honoring our experiences at the same time that God is here, and the great tragedies, right? The great tragedy of 9/11. And this is an aspect of healing the shadow and then taking those lessons learned, the shadow elements that became so clear for us, and the lessons that we learned, like in the compression of that, the denseness of that energy. And now we use it for the highest good. It's clearly a part of building the new. And look at these, look at this. Look at the colors. Look, I mean, it's like, look, there's like a lavender. There's like these, look at this peach. There's another lavender. Look at the green. Look at the blue, the light pale blue, like the sky. Look at that orange. Look how bright that orange is. Okay. And this, like the jewel of the violet. God, it's like so beautiful. I want to show you the one at here as well that we're just looking at here. See how that looks like? How that looks like this. See that down here? Yeah. All the way to the bottom. Isn't that, look at that, it's so awesome. I wasn't expecting to expand it to this size. I think, you know what I did? I think I downloaded the super huge file because I wanted to see how it would look if we super expanded it, and it just happened. Look at that. Look at that. And then look at that. Isn't that gorgeous? So what did we learn? What were the lessons of 9/11? I'm going to leave you to think about that on your own. I just did a 9/11 video that you can watch and listen to. But I'll tell you what I can say is, because I don't want to get into politics and stuff like that. There are a lot of other people who talk about that. What I want to talk about is the spiritual and its movement in our lives, how we can change and benefit our lives, our societies, our institutions, etc. with this knowledge. But let me tell you what was the most important, because, in YouTube analytics, you can go and you can look at if there were bumps or places where people that got extra views within the video itself. And the aspect of the area of the video that got the most, like where it had a bump, and it's like people must have shared just this part. It was Alex and I talking about the real America, what Americans are really like, and that at our essence, we have always been about people helping people. We've always been, at our essence, good to each other. I lived in Europe, and I lived in a country that was a wonderful experience. It was a blessing and honor to interact with and become friends with many people from many countries around the world. And I always remember, I went to lunch with one of these women, and she had lived in the United States for many years. So she was very familiar with American culture and Americans, but she was originally from another country, and now we were both living in this country and met each other. She was telling me about friends that she had in a country that was a completely different country, with completely different culture and everything. And she was telling me about a particular friend of hers who was in a country that had a huge disaster. The government of the particular country was not able to respond with like a load of resources immediately. There was a period of time where they weren't getting government response, and that was not hours. It was days. I don't know if it went into a week and a half. She said that the Americans, just the regular people living around, and I'm not talking about necessarily the government officials. She said the Americans started organizing. They started organizing the people they knew locally. They started working with them. They started bringing in supplies. They started doing all these things. I didn't know that was really super typical American until she told me that story. And, I think back to like the Cajun Navy during the Houston hurricane. And my parents were actually in Houston during that hurricane. And thank God, my dad was in engineering, and so he picked one of the very few spots to live in that did not flood. But remember that Cajun Navy, and on Twitter, how everybody was coordinating and sharing information and helping, and you just had random people all around the country just decide that they were going to put their entire night and the entire next day and all the hours they had available into them to pitching in. And this is just now of course, people around the world do this as well. Okay, so I'm trying to say this in a way to not disparage anyone else, but to remind us of who we are. And this was the most important, this was the part of the 9/11 video that people focused in on. Remembering who we are. We're good people. We help others. We help each other. We care about each other. And did we go through incredible tragedy on 9/11 and remember that? Do you know that I have a ton of magazines from 9/11. But listen, I have an article on this. I'll link it. Here's what I saw in those magazines. I looked at it years and years later. And, as the divisions in the country have gotten more and more, I remember in 2015, I wrote my first 9/11 article. I was so passionate and I was so concerned about things that were happening even back then. I opened all the magazines from 9/11 because I got them the next day. And it was people of different races, people of different nationalities, people of different creeds, people of different sex, people of different gender, people of whoever they were. Everybody was helping other people. I mean, you see it in photo after photo after photo after photo. The dust from the towers didn't only fall on certain people with certain labels. It fell on everyone. The tragedy didn't only happen to certain people with certain labels. It happened to all of us. And it happened to all of us around the country. It happened to all of us around the world because all of us were affected. The New Yorkers lived through it. okay, and the visitors to New York. They took the hit for us. And I pray to God that what they went through this week reminds us. Dig deep in your heart and soul and remind yourself of who we really are as Americans, because we can do better. We can be who we are. We can shine again, because we are a light and a beacon of hope. Each other. We are a light and a beacon of hope for each other. And my dad came to this country for that reason. His entire dream, his whole life, growing up as a kid, was to come to America. And he came to America. He did not speak English. He could not use his schooling, like he couldn't, transfer credit and all that kind of stuff. He worked in a factory until he learned English, and then he switched into his career. And he inspired me with the belief in the American dream, with the knowledge of how valuable it is to be an American, with the respect for our culture and who we are as a people. Are we imperfect? Yeah, because we're human. But one thing I learned when I lived abroad was that people see us as a beacon of light. And we need to start seeing that in ourselves again. We need to start seeing each other as our fellow man and woman, as our fellows, as potential friends, not potential enemies, as another child of God in a different body. Let me tell you something. I remember many past lifetimes. I'm a woman right now, okay? I'm a woman who digs guys, okay? But I remember being a man who was gay. I remember being different races. I remember, being from different countries. My soul in all of those incarnations looked the same. Okay, I remember being Egyptian. My soul looked the same. I remember being Asian. My soul looked the same. The light within me looked the same as the person that I look like now. In some lifetimes, it might have been brighter. In some lifetimes, it might have been more covered over because maybe, I had tragedy or I was in a very difficult, I remember being in the French Revolution. I was just a woman. I was a woman whose beau, I don't know if we were married or not, and he was a French soldier, and he died. He was killed during the revolution in the city, and I remember running up to him and just being completely distraught. That's the only thing I remember about that lifetime. So listen, we're children of God. If we could remember that first, maybe we could be kinder to each other and, importantly, kinder to ourselves. And remember the words of Jesus. These people are about to stone a woman who has sinned in their view. And he says, let you who have not sinned cast the first stone. And my friend Ralph used this today in a text, and so I thank him for that inspiration. Anyway, we were talking about a different topic, but yet a similar topic because it revolved around people harming others for reasons of a story in their mind. And I guess I just want to ask you to remember who you are, to remember the light within,